In today's video, we will be going over the Abyss path. We'll be starting at Sequence 9, going all the way down Sequence 0, covering all the abilities along the way. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's kick things off straight away with Sequence 9 Criminal, and it is a very decent Sequence 9, nothing too crazy, but pretty much they just gain one new ability, and that's the fact that they are proficient with any weapon, and they can even turn non-combat tools into weapons. So let's say, of course, they become proficient using guns, they become proficient using knives, but they can also grab a headset and turn into a weapon that can kill somebody. So they basically can turn anything into a lethal weapon, on top of having very, very good physical stats for a Sequence 9. So very decent, and this is also the stage where they already start to get evil desires burnt into their heart, but they're still able to maintain their consciousness and not impulsively act on these desires yet. Anyways, let's move on to Sequence 8. Now let's move on to Sequence 8 Unwinged Angel. In my opinion, that's the coolest sounding name in the entire series. Basically, they only gain one new ability, and that is the fact that they gain demonic-like attributes. This means that they get 2 to 3 spells, and this varies from person to person. These spells can be something like putting a curse on someone, being something like being able to produce fog to escape from dangerous situations. It can include temporary blasting someone with spiritual pressure with their fist, so it really varies from person to person, but it is definitely something inhumane as they start to look more and more inhumane. Also, they're no longer able to suppress their desires. I told you at Sequence 9 they have these evil desires, but they still have a consciousness and are able to control them. However, from this point and moving forward, they are unable to control their desires, and they will act impulsively when they get them. Anyways, that's really all they get on top of some minor physical enhancements once again, and let's move on to Sequence 7. Now let's move on to Sequence 7 Serial Killer, and again, they really only gain one new ability, and that is the knowledge of ritualistic magic in relation to all types of things Devil and Abyss related. This means that they can, be a very versatile fighter in fights and outside of fights, being able to stop divination, spirit channeling, etc. But they also have a special ability where if they do enough ritualistic magic, they will eventually gain a favor from the Devil in the Abyss. Now, once they have a favor of a Devil in the Abyss, they can temporarily summon a projection of that, but that is a very rare case scenario as it is, extremely taxing not only on the serial killer, but the one being projected as well. On top of this, they also gain enhanced mental capabilities with a boosted intelligence, which is very useful once you're a serial killer and trying to escape, official Beyonders. Anyways, let's move on to Sequence 6. Now let's move on to Sequence 6 Devil, which might be the most complicated Sequence 6 in the entire series, but arguably the strongest Sequence 6 as well, just due to the fact of one ability, which I'll get to in just a second. First of all, the reason it's so complicated is because in the Abyss pathway, it's a very individual pathway, as in there'll be a bunch of differences between each Beyonder that use it. We already saw this back in Sequence 8. Once it becomes Sequence 8, each person will get 2 or 3 different abilities. Now, this is especially evident in Sequence 6 Devil, as once they advance this sequence, each person will become a different type of devil. Some devils may be more stealth related, being able to hide in certain areas, be unable to found by any type of divination that someone's seeking them. Another devil might be able to freely switch between body and spirit. Another devil may be able to possess certain Beyonders and basically disguise themselves as a person, almost like a Sequence 6 Faceless from the Fool pathway. And all in all, individual differences aside, they all share the same weakness, and that is the fact that they can easily lose control. On top of this, even if they don't easily lose control, they will always act on their impulses and evil desires. This means it's easy to bait them, and in general, in Lord of the Mysteries, it is so important to maintain rationality during these Beyonder battles, and the fact that they are so easily swayed by these desires that they have within them is such a major weakness for them. But regardless, their abilities are incredibly busted, so let's move on to those. The first ability they get, and this is arguably the strongest Sequence 6 ability in the entire series, is Danger Premonition. If anyone within a town size, a city size, depending on how strong the devil is, intends to harm them and kill them, they will automatically detect it, and then with that sort of knowledge, they can set up a trap for that person, they can run away, they have a bunch of different options at their disposal. So all in all, a crazy abilities, but their other abilities are also very good, so let's go over those. Other abilities they get is Slow. They're able to slow targets directly within a 7 to 8 meter radius. They're able to inflict death onto an opponent, which basically makes the target's blood rust and clot. Any victim who doesn't have defense against this will basically fall very close to dying instantly. They're able to corrupt an opponent directly. They're able to control fire within a certain radius. They're able to create a sulfur fireball, which anyone who gets caught in it and breathes that sulfur in will get poisoned. They're able to cause a stream of poison. They're able to create a bunch of flames, sort of like a volcanic eruption. They're able to summon a sword from the flames, etc., etc. So some very busted abilities. And honestly, when looking back at it, this might be the strongest Sequence 6 in the entire series. And on top of all of this, they have a last ace card resort, which is they're able to transform themselves into a devil. They're turned into a massive devil, like a traditional one with goat horns coming out of it and wings sprouting from their back. And in this form, they're able to use all of their abilities to a very, very high level. But this, of course, does increase their desires. This does increase all of their weaknesses that I mentioned before. But all in all, this is just another trump card that they have up their sleeves on top of their other 8 to 10 abilities that they just got. So it is absolutely broken in my opinion. And on top of this, the other abilities they got a Sequence 8 and Sequence 9 all get strengthened, their intelligence, their hand-to-hand combat, their ability to use anything as a deadly weapon. So in my opinion, this is quite easily the strongest Sequence 6 in the series. Let's move on to Sequence 5. Now let's move on to Sequence 5, Desire Apostle. We all know how important it is to maintain your rationality during battles, and this sequence is made to make opponents lose all rationality. Basically, if an opponent feels any type of emotion to a relatively intense level, the Desire Apostle can amplify that emotion that they're feeling to a tremendous degree. For example, if it's fear, of course I look absolutely scary if I'm in my demonic state, for example. That fear will be amplified, and if it goes beyond the target's limit, they will automatically suffer a fatal wound, be incapacitated, and then it's a free kill for me. On top of this, if I forcibly take out one of the 2 horns I have in my demonic state and burn them, I can avoid all defense of the opponent. It's pretty much an unavoidable attack for any other Sequence 5, Sequence 6, 7, 8, 9, and they will forcibly feel the emotion I want them to feel. That can be serenity, it can be absolute fear, it can be anything I want it to be, but all in all, it doesn't matter what emotion they're feeling. If it goes beyond their capability to feel it, even if it's happiness, they will suffer a fatal wound. On top of this, they gain another ability called Avatar of Desire. They're basically able to turn themselves into a thick black liquid. Yes, they're able to turn their body into a liquid, and this liquid is very nimble, very agile, allowing them to escape from situations and countering again divination and other things such as spirit channeling. On top of this, while in this state, they can also inflict their other ability that they have with desires and anything related to that. Anyways, that's really all we know for Sequence 5, and let's move on to Sequence 4. Now let's move on to one of the best all-rounder sequences in the entire series called Sequence 4 Demon. This is where they become a demigod, and they gain not only very strong physical enhancements, but extremely strong mental enhancements, and they definitely prefer to go down the mental route. Let me explain to you their one new ability. The first and only new ability they get is Mind Fog. It's not like something like lowering someone's IQ, but it basically makes opponents irrational the longer they fight. The longer they fight, the more they're able to inflict this opponent with the Mind Fog, and the more irrational the opponent becomes. Of course, I don't need to explain again why rationality is so important in Beyonder battles. On top of this, they just gain all their other abilities strengthened. First of all, their mastery over desires has reached an insane point. Earlier I told you that the opponent needs to feel a certain level of the emotion in order for the Sequence 5 Desire Apostle to inflict it on an extreme scale. That no longer needs to happen. That condition no longer exists. They can directly inflict the emotion even if the opponent is as cold as a rock, right? Showing no emotions. It doesn't matter to them. They just directly inflict it on the opponent, and the opponent has no defenses against this mind and mental attack, then they're absolutely cooked. So if it's a pathway more focused on combat and more on physical defenses, and they don't have many mental defenses, they can't really do too much against this ability, right? They can also use sound, eye contact, movements, gestures, and various other means to directly influence people within a certain radius, making them enter sort of a state of delusion where their emotions and desires will automatically expand and become a lot more intense without them even knowing. On top of this, their mental and physical attributes get massively increased and are definitely up there on the stronger side of all the other Sequence 4s in the series. Their danger premonition can now be 2 to 3 days in advance. 2 to 3 days. That is ridiculously broken. If I'm planning to kill a demon in 3 days, he can detect that. He knows that he's gonna get killed in 3 days, so he can make preparations 3 days in advance. That is a long damn time. And lastly, they're one of the only pathways that are able to use their incomplete mythical creature form in the way that they replace certain body parts with their mythical creature form. So other pathways are unable to do this. If they use their incomplete mythical creature form as a last resort, they will lose control and die after. However, the Abyss pathway can replace, for example, my hand with the mythical creature form, and now that hand will be able to perform these crazy abilities that maybe a Sequence 2 would be able to perform as well. However, there is still a risk to this. You probably still will lose control, but it's definitely an ace card that is good to have up their sleeve. This is why I mean it's a great all-rounder pathway with some of the highest physical capabilities for Sequence 4 and one of the highest mental capabilities. So yeah, all in all, very good, and let's move on to Sequence 3. Now let's move on to Sequence 3 Blatherer, and we don't know too much about the sequence, but they do gain one really strong ability, which is called Blathering. This means that whatever words that they speak will directly be ingrained into the opponent's psyche and mind and cause all types of negative effects, right? If you have no defenses against any type of mind abilities, mental abilities, you'll basically die on the spot. You'll explode into a million different pieces, you will lose control and become an incomprehensible monster. So it can have all types of abilities, but of course the downside is that you have to be very close for the opponent to hear your words, right? However, that isn't the end of it, because it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. As long as there is a connection between you and another target, you can basically directly speak those words into the target's mind. What do I mean by connection? Let's take, for example, their danger premonition. Now it's like at 4 to 5 days, right? If someone's trying to kill me in 5 days away, they will try and kill me. I can detect that, and that automatically makes a connection between me and the target. Not only do I know their location, I know their identity, but I can also blather words directly into his head from now and kill them automatically from now. So it is very busted. If you don't have the preparation to deal with these mental attack, you're basically done for. Anyways, let's move on to sequence 2. Now let's move on to sequence 2, Bloody Archduke, and they gain 2 authorities, the first one being blood. They're basically able to transform into blood, and anyone they touch in any type of way will automatically bleed from all orifices in their body, basically dying on the spot. But they also have some level of authority over fear, but we don't know too much about it. Now for the strength and ability, first of all, their desire mastery again gets an increase. They're able to invoke the innermost desires of anyone and bring them forth to life, and of course manipulate them with all the other abilities related to desires that they have. On top of this, they now have access to something called a seed of malice. When someone's desires are triggered with their first ability, they're able to plant a seed of malice into that person. Now that seed will slowly erode and corrupt the person with desire, and of course, again, as I told you, once that desire reaches a certain level, that person will die on the spot or get a fatal wound onto the spot. Now, the OP thing about the Seed of Malice is that you cannot counter it very easily, because, for example, if I have multiple bodies, let's say a marionettist has multiple marionettes, even if one marionette gets the Seed of Malice, all other marionettes will also get affected by the same thing, including the main body, right? That's what makes it so overpowered. Now, this even affects the mirror world, for example, with the Demoness of Unaging, or whatever other sequences a Demoness has with the ability to go through the mirror world. And the last thing that makes the Seed so OP is that the fact that they are able to revive within opponents. Let's say I put a Seed of Malice into someone and my main body dies. I'm done for, right? No. I can revive within someone that has a Seed of Malice in them, killing them on the spot and reviving myself right there and right then. That is just absolutely busted to think about. And the last ability they get is that their desires are so strong that any other ability that has mental abilities, they're able to overpower it with their own desires and break free from that mental ability. For example, a Demoness tries to charm them, even if it's at the sequence 2 level, even if it's at the sequence 1 level of charming, yeah, they won't get affected of it simply because their desires and they are so strong that they're able to break free from it. Anyways, let's move on to sequence 1. Unfortunately, we don't know anything about sequence 1, Filthy Monarch. We only know the fact that they have authority over filth, degeneration, corrosion, and pollution. That's all we know, so let's move on to sequence 0. Now let's move on to sequence 0 Abyss. It is extremely strong, but unfortunately we don't know too many things about it. First of all, they have authority over degeneration, depravity, curses, and mutations. They're also the embodiment of the emotion of fear, which is something that overlaps with the darkness pathway. They're also the embodiment of malice. As for their abilities, we only know that they gain one ability, and that is Desire Mastery. Again, remember when I told you they can transform into a thick black liquid? Yeah, that basically reaches a sequence 0 level. They can inflict malice and desire wherever this liquid goes, wherever they go, and they can go from human to human because everyone has a small abyss inside of them, meaning they can basically live inside a human and that person won't even know, and they can affect them with desires, malice, etc. That's really it. They're very sneaky. It's a very strong pathway, definitely very strong, especially sequence 6 and sequence 4. I think those two are the sequences that shine the most out of all of the sequences, and all in all, I put it at B tier. B tier in terms of strength. However, in terms of practicality, it goes straight into F tier. It is the least practical pathway out of the entire series. Arguably, Chained is up there too. We'll get to that eventually. But there is simply no point in taking this pathway. You will be hunted down by official Beyonders. You're not going to be able to escape them. They have methods just to counter the Abyss pathway, right? There's the Sun pathway's Existence, which counters the Abyss. There's the whole Twilight Giant pathway, which counters demons. So there are a bunch of counters to you. You will get hunted by official Beyonders non-stop. It is going to be extremely hard for you to advance. And once you act on your desires, you won't be able to control yourself. So all in all, I'll give it strength, top of B tier, maybe A tier, practicality, F tier. Thank you guys all so much for coming. Let me know down in the comments which pathway you'd like to see next, and love you guys. See you all in the next one.